Welcome back. Responding to the questions raised by the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi on the Election Commission, the UP Election Commission has now responded. We have played that story just 30 seconds ago, shifting focus to what I wish to discuss right now. Sending a strong message the day after US President Donald Trump increased the tariff war against India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stressed that India will never compromise with the interests of its farmers and fishermen. Prime Minister was speaking at an important event where he said, and I quote him, he will have to pay the price and he knows that he is ready to do so. He was ready to do it for the farmers. Prime Minister was speaking at the Swaminathan Centenary International Conference in Delhi, and what Mr. Modi said, I'm quoting him now, the interest of the farmers is our top priority. India will never compromise with the interests of its farmers, livestock holders and fishermen, and I know that I'll have to pay a huge price for this personally, but I'm ready. India is ready for the sake of country's farmers. This, of course, is coming a day after Donald Trump announced extra 25% tariff on Indian exports as penalty for New Delhi continuing to import Russian crude oil. Earlier, US had imposed 25% tariffs on Indian exports on July 20th. What does this mean? First up the story, then I bring in the guests.
मैं जानता हूं व्यक्तिगत रूप से मुझे बहुत बड़ी कीमत चुकानी पड़ेगी, लेकिन मैं इसके लिए तैयार हूं.
Prime Minister Modi making it personal. The tiff with the United States amid Donald Trump's tariff trip. A day after Trump escalated the tariff tirade with an additional 25% tariff on India, taking total tariff to 50%, the highest on any Asian country. India's roaring retort, articulated by the Prime Minister himself, calling out Donald Trump's bluff that India will not give in and that farmers' interests remain supreme for the government.
हमारे लिए अपने किसानों का हित सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता है. भारत अपने किसानों के, पशुपालकों के और मछुआरे भाई बहनों के हितों के साथ कभी भी समझौता नहीं करेगा.
India exports a wide variety of agricultural products to the United States and is one of the sectors set to bear the brunt of Trump's tariffs. Agriculture and dairy sectors are key sticking points in the India-US trade talks. US wants access to Indian markets for its agriculture and dairy products. US is also pushing for GMC, but India has been resisting to protect these critical sectors. The point Prime Minister has been insisting on for long.
आज दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था कई आशंकाओं से गुजर रही है. अस्थिरता का माहौल है. ऐसे में दुनिया के देश अपने अपने हितों पर फोकस कर रहे हैं.
Prime Minister's bold position has also found takers in the opposition ranks as two Congress MPs asked the government to call Trump's bluff and look for other options.
वो लोग असलियत में 50% तक पहुंच जाएंगे, तब तो हमारा जवाब यही हो सकता है कि हम तो रेसिप्रोकल टैरिफ्स के नाम पे आपके ऊपर हम सिर्फ करीब 17% एवरेज टैरिफ लगा रहे हैं. वो 17 तो हम भी 50 कर देंगे. अगर आप हमें ऐसे करेंगे तो हम आपको भी वही करेंगे जो आप हमें कर रहे हैं.
सरकार को सीधा खड़ा होके कोई रीढ़ की हड्डी दिखानी चाहिए. तो इसमें एक मौका है, जो ग्लोबल ट्रेडिंग आर्किटेक्चर है उसको दोबारा से रीऑर्डर करने का.
But there are others for whom it's politics as usual.
देश के लिए एक मजबूत सरकार की जरूरत है, मजबूत प्रधानमंत्री की जरूरत है, गृह मंत्री, सब रक्षा मंत्री हो या विदेश मंत्री हो, देश के लिए मंत्री चाहिए. आज जब भी कोई आपत्ति आती है तो ये लापता होते हैं.
प्रधानमंत्री जी इतने कमजोर हो गए हैं कि अमेरिका जैसे नचा रही है वैसे ही नाच रहे हैं. अब आप सोचिए 50% टैरिफ होना कितना भारी देश को नुकसान होने जा रहा है, और इस पे कोई बात नहीं कह रहे ये लोग.
The government hit back at the opposition, saying that Trump's tariffs are on 140 crore Indians and the country should be united in its response.
आज जो है अमेरिका यदि कोई हमारे ऊपर टैरिफ इंपोज कर रहा है तो देश के 140 करोड़ लोगों के ऊपर इंपोज कर रहा है। हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी के हाथ को मजबूत करना है, देश का हाथ मजबूत होना चाहिए, जिससे देश को पता, दुनिया को पता चलना चाहिए कि भारत, चाहे ऑपरेशन सिंदूर का मामला हो, चाहे अमेरिका के टैरिफ का मामला हो, भारत एक साथ है, एकजुट है।
Trump's tirade against India is based on New Delhi buying Russian oil, which India has clarified is guided by market forces. The US president warned of new secondary sanctions for Moscow's trading partners when he was asked why India was being singled out for its business ties with Russia, leaving other nations that had been buying Russian energy.
Indian officials have said that there are other countries that are buying Russian oil.
It's okay.
Like China, for instance,
It's
buys
okay.
more.
Yeah.
Why are you singling India out for these additional
It's
sanctions?
only been 8 hours, so let's see what happens over the next.
Sanctions.
You're going to see a lot more.
So this is a taste of
You're
what's
going to see a lot more. You're going to see so much secondary sanctions.
India and US ties have hit the tariff turbulence amid Trump's aggressive posturing. A team of US negotiators is expected to arrive in Delhi for trade negotiations at the end of this month. NDTV Bureau Report.
Joining me on the show tonight, Ashok Malik is the partner of the Asia Group. We have Sanjeev Joshipura, who is an executive director of India Diaspora. Christopher Clary is associate professor of political science at the University at Albany and non-resident fellow at Stimson Center. Ashok Malik, with the Prime Minister with the Prime Minister today having drawn that red line, would you say that India is now signaling that national interests will override trade compromises, even if that means a deepening rift with the US under Trump 2.0?
Look, national interest is paramount for any country. It's paramount for India, it's paramount for the US. So that goes without saying. Having said that, this conversation or this rancor over the past 3 or 4 days has gone well beyond the trade deal negotiation and the narrow issue of reciprocal tariffs between India and the US. The issue of tariffing India or placing tariffs on India for being one of several buyers of Russian energy, not even the biggest. Yeah. China is the biggest buyer of crude oil. Europe buys almost unlimited quantities of gas without any tariffs, without any sanctions. The fact that India has been singled out is quite honestly bewildering. When the entire tariffs conversation came up at the beginning of President Trump's term, it was meant as a challenge to a certain form of globalization which had been monopolized by Chinese manufacture. And it was meant to bring jobs back to the US. Now you have tariffs imposed on India as one of several buyers of Russian energy to stop Russia from taking forward the war in Ukraine. How is that relevant to the original purpose of tariffs and bringing back jobs to the US? It's moved several goalposts, and also some of the remarks the president and his team have made, quite honestly, been disparaging. So I suspect this will take a long time to unravel.
Okay, then Christopher, does Prime Minister Modi's assertive language mark a pivot away from conciliatory diplomacy with Washington, and what signals is India sending to the global south with this statement?
You know, it's clear that India has decided to publicly articulate some red lines on agriculture, to say that is an area that is of special sensitivity. You know, those of us that follow this know that. That's not a surprise, but the Prime Minister saying it in public does change the negotiation contours somewhat. I think India has been pretty restrained in its public rhetoric so far, and despite the Prime Minister arguing that there are certain protections that he will make for India's farmers, that still gives him wiggle room if his government decides it's appropriate to use it. I think there are still ways out of this present impasse. It is unfortunate, as Mr. Malik said, that we have we've got here now. And even if we navigate out of it, this will be something people remember in New Delhi for some time. But I still think we can get through this patch of turbulence.
Okay, so Sanjeev, the fact here is that both the leaders here are also catering to their domestic audience. Donald Trump says, "Make America great again." Prime Minister Modi is saying that he is looking after the interests of farmers and fishermen. Is this heading for a complete clash of egos? And can the two sides really strategically recalibrate in this relationship?
It's not a surprise to me that the tariff issue is so front and center at this moment in the relationship between the two countries. President Trump ran on this as a candidate, as we know, and so he's focusing on it now. One can argue the merits of it, but it's not a surprise either way. Also, as our previous speakers, Ashok and Christopher, have alluded to, I do not think that protecting national interests and building relations with other countries are mutually exclusive. I do think that an off-ramp is possible. As Indiaspora mentioned in our press statement just yesterday, the Indian diaspora is a vital link, a living bridge between the two countries that forms a very significant aspect of overall bilateral ties, which are very broad-based and which have been growing more and more robust over the past 25 years. And so my point is that it is very important that both countries take the off-ramp that is available. I recognize, of course, that there are sensitive negotiations occurring on sectoral matters that are important to both countries. And as you pointed out in your introduction, trade teams are working on that. But the overall, we should not be missing the forest for the trees. The overall aspect is that people-to-people ties between the two countries are vitally important. The India-US relationship is strategically and economically important as a cornerstone for peace in a turbulent world. And I do think that, I do believe that an off-ramp is not only possible, but will perhaps be taken over the next few weeks and months to get to a salutary outcome that is acceptable to both countries on the trade negotiations.
Can there be an acceptable solution from here onwards, given the maximalist position which has been taken by the US president here, Ashok Malik?
Again, two things here. One, on the trade deal itself, which is sitting in the White House waiting for the president's approval. It's been sent there by USTR, the US Trade Representative. India, my understanding is, has made a very ambitious offer, market access offer, perhaps the most ambitious in its history. In fact, somebody from USTR told me, a USTR official told me earlier this year that if this offer or something close to it had been made in the first Trump administration, we may have had a deal then. So India's offer is actually fairly generous. Can it be improved? I'm sure it can. But there are certain red lines, and dairy is a red line, wheat is a red line. Agriculture imports are red lines in many countries, Japan, the EU as a collective, Australia, and so on. But can that offer be negotiated and made a little better for both sides? Of course it can. What has happened in recent days with the flurry of comments on India's debt economy, on Pakistan, on Russia, and the secondary sanctions in the form of 25% for buying Russian crude oil, all of that has contracted the space available to the Indian government to be a little more generous, perhaps, or to rethink some of his positions on the trade offer. And that is why an off-ramp, which, of course, an off-ramp is always welcome, is more likely to take place after a certain period of studied silence. A lot has been said in the past 72 or 96 hours. We need to give people time to digest that and for tempers to cool down, unless more is said in the next few hours or days.
Christopher Clay, what is the end game here of the US president?
To some extent, we got here through a series of accidental almost events that it just happens to be the case that India's trade deal is still under negotiation when the U.S. has reached at least tentative agreements with other major partners like the EU and Japan and South Korea. And so because those sort of standstill agreements are in place, it makes it harder for the president to use the tariff lever, even if he might be displeased with the behavior of those states. So India doesn't have that deal in place. And then it's happening at a time when the president has also soured on his relations with Vladimir Putin. And so he's looking for ways, egged on by hawks in the U.S. Congress, to put pressure on Putin as he's trying to achieve some progress on the Ukraine war, which is something he said he would do on the campaign trail. So that intersection of a lingering lack of a trade deal with India for reasons associated with agriculture and other things, and then India's ability, at the U.S. request to some extent, at design, to import Russian oil and put some of at least the refined products back on the global market, those two kind of diverge, those paths have crossed in a way that has been injurious to U.S.-India relations. And it's possible, depending on how negotiations go between the U.S. and Russia, U.S., Russia, and Ukraine, in the very near term, that the president will feel less of a need to put pressure on Moscow and less of a need to pull on that secondary sanction lever. Of course, he's also in talks with China and China has levers of its own to pull with the U.S. And so the sort of other places where he might be able to put pressure on Putin those levers aren't available to him. And so he's pulling the India lever over and over again. The last thing I would say is there appears to have been some sort of breakdown in communication between the president and the prime minister. The press reporting and the anecdotes one hears differs about who has tried to make the last phone call, but I think the bulk of the evidence suggests that the president is eager to talk to the prime minister, and the prime minister is less eager to talk to the president. And this is ultimately an individual who values personal relationships, who talks about Prime Minister Modi being a friend. And I do think that the restoration of communications at the senior-most level may go some way in building some time for the professional negotiators to iron out the details.
And even as we are in the middle of this broadcast, Sanjeev, there is a news that is coming in and it's breaking right on your television screens that Prime Minister Modi and his Brazilian counterpart have just had a communication, and they have exchanged views on various regional and global issues of mutual interest. And they have agreed to enhance cooperation in trade, technology, energy, defense, agriculture, health, and people-to-people ties. How should this call be seen now?
There's no question in my mind, Maria, that India has been working for some time since its G20 presidency in 2023 and even before that, as positioning itself as a leader of the global South. Whether it's the inclusion of the African Union in the G20, whether it's India-Brazil ties, its outreach to Latin America, and so on and so forth. I think regardless of, and I think that is welcome, by the way. I think that is a good development in global affairs. But I think regardless of the ties that India may have with other important countries in the global South, that does not negate the great importance of India-US ties on various matters. Like I said, it's very broad-based, whether it's trade, it's diaspora, it's technological, it's strategic, it's defense, it's commercial, it's a lot of different things. And I think this is something that that India recognizes, that perhaps Brazil recognizes, and I think the United States in calmer moments will recognize as well. I know that right now is a time of high tension, but I think the historical evidence suggests over the past 25 years or so that when negotiations are resumed, that perhaps when leader-to-leader level talks do occur, that the end game, the end situation of this trade negotiation will not quite be at the place where we are today. One hopes, and I am optimistic, we at Indiaspora believe that, a few weeks from now, perhaps a few months from now, the situation will be far different and better than what it is right now.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Sanjeev, Ashok Malik, and Christopher Clary. Let's listen in to what Brazilian President Lula had to say.
Vocês pensam, eu não vou ligar para o Trump para comercial não, porque não quer falar. Mas pode ficar certo, Marina. Eu vou ligar para o Trump para convidá-lo para vir para a COP, porque eu quero saber o que ele pensa da questão climática. Vou ter a gentileza de ligar. Vou ligar para ele, vou ligar para o Xi Jinping, vou ligar para o primeiro-ministro Modi, vou ligar. Só não vou ligar para o Putin, porque o Putin não está podendo viajar. Mas vou ligar para muitos presidentes. Eu quero ver.
And joining me now is Arun Kumar Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Singh, given the sharp escalation in tariff threats from the US, how do you assess the diplomatic channels between New Delhi and Washington right now? Is back-channel diplomacy working, or is this a public pressure tactic?
The diplomacy at the moment, either back channel or the front channel, has not been as effective as one would like. And it's just inherent in the situation we are facing. I don't think anybody in particular has to be blamed for it. But I think what we are seeing is the politics of Donald Trump impacting on the US-India relationship. And that's because the way he had defined his politics was, one, he wants to project himself as the person who is generating peace agreements all across the world. He wants to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, get the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's one dimension of the challenge that we are facing. And so he made claims that he had generated the India-Pakistan ceasefire on 10th of May, which the government of India has said doesn't fit in the way the things actually develop. So there is a little difference there. The second is that he has defined his politics by projecting to his base that he's a very strong leader and he's making countries all over the world and their leadership given to his demands in terms of market access. And so you're seeing that Japan has essentially given in, has given an expanded market access to US products, and more than that, committed to invest $500 billion in the US economy. Similarly, the Europeans have committed to invest $600 billion in the US and buy $750 billion worth of energy supplies from the US. So that's the challenge. Now, in terms of the trade agreement with India, from the reports that have come out in the public domain, India has not been prepared to make the kind of concessions on agriculture, dairy, and some of the areas that the US has been demanding. So from Donald Trump's perspective, he's not able to project to his base that he's achieved market opening in India, like he's managed to do in Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, and the EU. So he doesn't want to project that. So he's moved with imposing tariffs on India, first 25% related to the trade discussions that were going on. And the second thing is that he's under pressure to show some progress related to Russia-Ukraine conflict, because in the beginning he said that in 24 hours he will bring that conflict to an end. And Russia has continued with whatever it is doing in Ukraine. So his own policy related to Russia, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is seen as failing at the moment. So he needs a diversion to show that he's taking some action related to that. So he's targeted India for 25% additional tariffs to say India is buying oil from Russia, but China is buying more oil from Russia. And he has not taken any action against China, because he's worried that the Chinese have countervailing power and will stop the supply of critical minerals and critical materials that the US needs. So that's the dilemma that is playing out. So the politics of Donald Trump is at the moment negatively impacted on the US-India relationship, and India has to deal with that situation.
Okay, Ambassador Singh, do you believe that this trade row could spill over into broader strategic ties, be it defense, cooperation, or technology, or will both sides, both India and the United States, ring fence the tensions to avoid damaging the larger partnership?
So, the way I watch the reaction coming from India, I think the essence is that let us try and preserve the larger partnership. Our statements have been measured. They have not been, trying to escalate the situation further. And they've factually pointed out the flaws in the arguments that the US is making. For example, in terms of Russia purchases, the Indian statement pointed out that Europe buys more from Russia than India has been buying. United States has been buying uranium from Russia. Then how do you target India and other countries? China was not mentioned, but China has been buying also much more than India has been buying. So that's one dimension. But having said that, there will certainly be an impact because, in India, there has been a sense for a long, long time that US is not a reliable partner and that it is a coercive partner. And that has been based on my experience with the US in the 50s, 60s, 70s. For the last 25 years, US has been making an attempt to come out of that impression. They did the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement with India. US was the only country in the world with the capacity to do a Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement with India and open up channels for India to access nuclear supplies, technology, and equipment across the world. No other country could have done that. In the 1999 Kargil conflict, US came out entirely in support of India and position related to line of control, and put pressure on Pakistan to withdraw from the transgression that it had done. From the skirmishes that we've had with China along the LAC, US has been supportive of India, including through supplies at times and sharing of information and intelligence. So they've tried to come out of that image. But with the action that Donald Trump has done, there is a resurrection in India of the perception that US is a coercive and not a reliable partner. And I think that is going to impact on the relationship because people here will question any major areas of cooperation that given this, will US be a reliable partner in the future? And if you look at Quad, for example, one of the areas why the Quad also worked for India was that there was an argument in the US that because Quad, India is a member of Quad, give higher level technology access to India. Do more trade with India, encourage US companies to invest in India, do more technology partnerships with India. But if, as a result of what Donald Trump has been saying and doing, the technology partnerships with India are curtailed, if US companies are discouraged from investment in India, for example, he said that Apple shouldn't invest in India or US companies should not hire in India. So if that is encouraged, then people will ask the question, what is the benefit for India from cooperation arrangements like the Quad? So those questions will be asked. So one can't rule out that unless both countries are able to come out of the present situation, it will impact on the longer term and the strategic partnership in the medium term. And it can take some time to come out of the challenge we are facing.
Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on this broadcast. We are putting out this entire discussion on NDTV.com. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching.